Welcome to our 100th podcast. Woohoo! Today we're talking about how concepts from the arts can reduce uncertainty and make your business more resilient. What's one thing you can do to reduce the cost of uncertainty like an art form? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants to explore and challenge workplace issues and to build better ways of working. It's a blend of theory and practice, grounded in real-world experience, working with organizations of all sizes across a wide range of industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want fresh ideas about the workplace, or just enjoy listening to consultants talk candidly about how to make work more effective and more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our 100th podcast.
Ding, ding,
I
ding,
cannot
ding, ding,
believe
ding,
it.
ding, ding. Woohoo.
Crazy.
Where's my
Oh my
cowbell?
gosh. Right. Oh, I should have brought a cowbell. I have
have
them all.
one.
I have them all over the place here.
We always need more cowbell.
That's right. Absolutely. So, for those who don't know, if you've been watching, you should know. But my name is Rich Cruz. I'm an organizational development consultant, and I'm joined by my co-hosts and co-authors and co-everything, Ben Kleinman. Hey, Ben.
Hey, everyone.
And we're welcoming back to the stage Sharyl Volpe over there in the Philly area. Hey, Sharyl, how are you?
Great. So great to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you back for our 100th episode. This is awesome. Such a
Can't believe it.
milestone. So we're coming to you today to talk about the arts because we have one thing in common. Not just one thing. We have lots of things in common. But one common thread that we do have is we all have a bit of an arts background, right? So Ben and Cheryl, both of you are English majors from your bachelor's degrees, right? Ben from Brown and Cheryl from Pitt, right? And you both had theater backgrounds. So I've personally have a BA from, or they call it AB, from Chicago in visual art, right? And there's so many things in the arts that can relate to business. And in fact, in April, Ben and I are going to be here in the Chicago area. We're going to be talking a bit about the arts and change management. And we've talked a little bit about that before in some other episodes. But where have you seen the arts? Have you seen the arts used in business in your experience?
Yeah.
Especially in change management.
Yes. I mean, working on, scripts and even in a corporate environment, scripts for corporate communication. And then
Sure.
in entertainment, scripts for performances. So
Right on.
yeah, it's pervasive at both ends.
Yep, I see that. Yeah. And Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I think to build on what Cheryl was saying, there's some sense of performative art when you're dealing with a fairly senior person who's giving a presentation or is going to talk to a group of folks, especially if it's a large group of folks. There's a lot of scripting and quasi-rehearsing and prep that goes involved, and there's all the handlers that get that person kind of ready in the same way that a stage crew would kind of prep the stage, and you have script writers who are sort of helping to massage the messaging and all that sort of stuff. And someone usually is trying to coach the senior person on how to present and where to stand and how to look and what tone and this and that. And so it's sort of a quasi performance in that sense.
It's show business, baby. It certainly is.
Don't tell that to anyone in the corporate world. But yes,
yeah, I guess so. That's right.
It is kind of show in some senses.
You do have to give them the razzle dazzle.
No lack of drama.
No lack of drama is right. Yes, absolutely.
But in other scenes, I've sort of in other scenes, no pun intended. In other ways, I think we've sort of also seen where the idea of, in theater anyways, you might workshop an idea in rehearsals
Right.
You sort of see that in a contextual way in business where you might have some idea of what a customer wants and you kind of workshop that. And it's a little bit different how you workshop it, but the theme is the same in terms of you're exploring an idea, you're seeing if it has legs, or you're seeing if it has funny or is getting the emotional response you want. In theater, in a business sense, you're sort of workshopping the idea of, does this product or service fit the need? Do we tweak it this way? Do we tweak it that way? And then you start to refine it, you hone it, you shape it, and then you have opening night when it goes live or when you put it on a shelf and start selling it.
That's right.
Right.
Sure.
And both examples have a hierarchy, right? Even though in a theater setting, there's a culture of performance. In corporate, the culture and the ease of that process depends on the culture of that company or that corporation. But in both cases, you have your director, you have your stage manager, you still have a hierarchy. It's just that I think one, which is the theater, lends itself more easily to the culture of creativity. Whereas in a corporate setting, it depends on the culture that determines how easily this creative process works with the psychological safety
Yeah,
baked
for
in
sure. For
and
sure.
that loss of ego to take risks and be more creative.
Yeah. In our last episode, Ben had brought up, well, we were talking about communication. And then at one point, the idea of a director kind of coaxing ideas out of somebody, getting them to try something different, rather than, do this and do that. Like, why don't we try, this or that was, I couldn't help but to relate that in the business sense to, what happened on the stage.
Right? Trust falls, right? How do you do that in a conference room?
Yeah.
That-
I think for a while there was that trend of kind of icebreakers and stuff going around in the corporate circles, and trust falls and things like that were part of that. And so you have sort of that nice overlap. And I think everyone in the corporate world was always trying to steal good ideas for how to do icebreakers or team building things from the world of arts.
Yes, the world of workplace comedies at least has one episode where somebody does a trust fall and they don't get caught.
Right.
More like a trust fail.
Right.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, what we had talked about today in our 100th episode was bringing this to the arts, business and the arts, and then putting this in the context of a concept that I'm going to try to quickly explain, which is the concept of SIP, which is sequencing, iteration, and permutations. And this came from a professor, Jasper Goodrich from the School of the Art Institute, and also teaches at the Hyde Park Arts Center here in Chicago. And I had an opportunity to sit in on a parents session because my child goes to the School of the Arts Institute. And the idea was that it was a printmaking process. And in this process, you were to create a sequence of related events, right? And so it was like, oh, this is process, right? And then it was taking either one of these or several of these and iterating on one or more of these segments, right? And then out of those iterations came a completely different concept, or sometimes it could be a totally different media, or medium, right? It could be some other thing that's the permutation that comes out of that. And I couldn't help but to put that into, like, boy, that really can work with organizational change. It could work with learning. It could help with, all kinds of things, because we're adding structure, we're adding learning, and the process of, making these iterative changes. And then of course, then there's the, from those learnings and those changes, what can come out of that, for innovation, all that. I said a lot there, folks. What do you think?
I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a little bit more of maybe a formalized way of talking about some of the stuff we've just been talking about, and giving it a little bit of structure and artistic framework and academic rigor.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think when I was doing some research on this after you brought up the topic of this SIP, Rich, one of my favorite words that came up was epistemology. And I think if I ever heard epistemology in a business setting, I'd probably see 90% of the people in the room start to vomit. And so it's a really nice way of sort of taking this idea and then, let's say in our conversation, trying to figure out how do we start to bring this to life in a way that business folks might resonate with.
Okay, my tiny brain is hurting with this word epistemology.
I know, right?
Yes. Can
like,
you
what?
give me the
Yeah, so the
shorthand
little Benny
definition?
brain version of epistemology is essentially it's the theory of knowledge. And
Okay.
so how do we gather and validate knowledge, and what's the scope of our knowledge and things like that. So it has to do with
Nice.
theories of knowledge. And for
Awesome.
me, again, this is the tiny Ben brain version of SIP. It's taking that and saying, okay, it's a knowledge, it's embedding knowledge within a business setting. And part of that, I'm sure we'll get into, is this idea that you're trying to learn for the sake of learning, but in a structured way, and you
Sure.
need cultural enablers for that, and all of those kinds of good things. But the whole point of it is to, in a business setting, reduce the cost of uncertainty and then allow your organization to explore these ways to adapt and become better at adapting and being more resilient, so that when you do face these uncertain situations, you're better at navigating how to do them. And in my tiny brain, that's how I think about it. But that encompasses so much of all of the stuff we've been talking about and what we'll get
Sure.
into for the rest of the show. I mean, there's so many critical enablers and things that you need to have just as table stakes, and certain environments, industries where it makes sense and where it doesn't, and all that. So
Sure.
yeah.
Your tiny brain is projecting quite big enough for you. That was my takeaway for sure. And I would only add to that, Ben, the idea that there is this safety, there's this trust. If a leader can set the tone for that safety and trust in a culture where the ego is the least important thing in these processes, it enables that comfort in ambiguity, because that is ever present as change happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Why don't we do this? We're about at that time where we have to take a break. You were going, but then you took a breath, Ben. What's on your
I was
mind?
going to ask Sharyl a question, and
No,
maybe
please.
it's a little bit academic, but from a
My tiny brain, go easy on me, Ben.
no way, man. You're the practicing clinical resident here, expert on our show. If you have a manager who's trying to bring out the best in his or her people, do you want that person ideally to create a setting that is very psychologically safe, that encourages experimentation and speaking up in meetings without fear of getting shut down, or voicing ideas? Do you also have to kind of coax a little bit of each person's ego out and allow them to bring a little bit of their ego to the fore and say, I'm gonna kind of say something, or I'm gonna act out something and see where it goes, and know that I can be just a little bit wacky. On some of our prior episodes, I've jumped many a shark, and I think Rich has been plenty comfortable letting me sort of ride myself into a brick wall, as it were. But does the manager need to sort of not ego massage, but ego coax in a way?
It's about walking the walk, and it has to happen over time. A manager who is commandeering or has control issues and everybody already knows it cannot just show up one day and say, relax, no fear, say what you want, right? And in a writing room, for example, right? I mean, it's so dynamic.
Right?
Yeah. It takes time to cultivate that safety, and it does depend on the industry. It does depend on the situation. Sometimes, a writing room is brand new and that leader doesn't have a chance to cultivate that safety. But
Sure.
again, the context, we are all here to pitch our best ideas. And you'll see people get, spoken down to. You'll see people who want to say something and can't. And for me in that situation, it's like the chameleon on a patchwork quilt, right? I can see what's happening because I'm not producing in that moment. I'm leading that room or structuring that room, and I can see the energies. And when it works, it's a beautiful thing. But when there's tension and you can see people hesitating and the product is not forming, iterations aren't coming, it can be traumatic.
Sure. Sure.
And you need therapy in the other room.
But there's a lot that can come out of that conflict and chaos, right? I mean, geez, even in the boardroom, we have those, that whole, the stages of team formation, forming, storming, or performing journey, right? And that storming phase is inevitable, and it's people finding where they fit and all that stuff. So that it makes a lot of sense for a writing room to be, in that situation. But you need probably a pretty strong leader, but somebody who has some degree of empathy to, help cultivate the participation.
Right.
Yeah.
And in a corporate setting where the expectation is always at this higher level of creating and there's no authenticity there, not to beat that word to death even further, but if there's no trust of that leader's intentions, that's when the back channeling starts happening. That's when people are snickering. That's when the Slack attack is happening in private. That's when the water cooler toxicity begins, right? And there has to be a match between the walk and the talk there.
Sure. Well, let's do this, folks. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about the sequence area of this, and then move into the learning part. And then maybe when we come back after the second break, we'll wrap it up with what can come out of that as permutations and see where it takes us. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Right on. We'll be right back.
Oh, hi. I'm Hermie, the HR hermit crab. So I have a quick question. Have you ever had that one employee who knows how everything works, but if you ask them to write it down, they say, "Oh, it's easy," and then don't write anything down? Yeah, me too. Try getting Hermione to share how she sets up her spreadsheets. Sheesh. Here's the thing. When knowledge stays in people's heads, performance gets wobbly. Training doesn't stick, new hires struggle, and suddenly everyone's asking, why did this used to work? That's why we talk about the knowledge to performance tree model as featured in TD Magazine from Harmonious Workplaces. Knowledge forms the roots of an organization's value. If you don't capture it before people retire, resign, or burn out, performance doesn't grow. You see, you can buy new systems, you can launch new initiatives, but without the roots, you mostly grow frustration. Anyway, I'm Hermie saying that Harmonious Workplaces is here to help you keep the good stuff from walking out the door. Make change your friend. Bye.
And we're back. So we have been talking about bringing the arts into the context of organizational change and knowledge, so, just to kind of bring something to our listeners too, right? So the three of us have been published in TD Magazine, Talent Development Magazine, through the Association of Talent Development Magazine. Yes, TD Magazine. So our article on Plant the Seeds for Knowledge Transfer is something that we've been talking about the last 2 months now or so. But I think this, what Ben was talking about earlier, with his $10 word there.
7 syllables.
There you go. That's right. What was that again, Ben?
Epistemology.
Epistemology. Love it. So what I thought we would bring to this, in this segment is talking about, again, where we're talking about SIP, sequencing, iteration, permutations, right? And starting with the sequencing part of things, right? And so in the context of where I was coming from, this, again, it was a print workshop, sequences of different images, right? That can happen. But in the business context, right? Finding different business processes, work packages, workflows, um, the standardization of some of the work that needs to be done to what you were saying, Ben, earlier is like that, and kind of the concept for this show is helps to reduce that uncertainty to some extent. Yeah,
Right. And the whole idea of sequences is in a business setting. I guess I'm translating that to something that you said earlier, Rich, is this idea of structure.
structure.
And in the context of this artistic approach, it's providing just enough structure to allow you to do in its final state, in its goal state, which you may or may not ever get to, this idea of structure that allows you to have some sort of creativity and intentional learning while still being productive and getting your processes and widgets built and knowledge out the door or services served to clients or things like that, staying
Sure,
compliant within regulated industries, all of that. But it gives you just that structural foundation, if
absolutely.
that makes sense.
Yep, yep. And Cheryl, you had mentioned before about when you were in the entertainment world that there was a structure that was a repeatable structure for specifically comedic writing, right?
That's right. That's right. There was a methodology that once it was learned, it was the same structure that was applied to each iteration of the creative process for a specific aspect of the program that we were creating.
Sure.
And that the more the writers or participants in that structure became familiar with it, they were able to be more free with their contributions because there was that structure
Yeah, that
there
makes sense.
within which to work and give it
Sure.
your all creative.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That makes sense. And I can't help but to think of, like, from a musical standpoint, some of the song forms that are out there, right? Like the blues,
Right.
right? It's 12 bars. There's so many different permutations that have happened from the structure, right? Just libraries full of music that stems from this the same structure, but it allows people to be able to express different thoughts and new and innovative storytelling, right, through the same form.
Poetry, iambic, pentameter, different formats that are very specific, right?
Yep. Yep.
Same. Mhm.
Sure. Sure.
It just occurred to me that this is maybe where this idea of there's a method to the madness.
That's
You have the
yeah.
structure, that's the method, and then the creativity is the madness.
It makes absolute
You're giving
sense.
some framework or format. We've talked about on prior shows where you can have some amount of creativity, but it needs to be bounded.
Yeah.
And so maybe
Yeah.
that's what this structure is giving our creators, whether they're artistic creators or business creators or some combination of both.
Sure. Sure. And it makes it, to me, from a motivational standpoint, it somewhat makes sense because we like we're creatures of habit, right? We don't as much as we have to change and adapt. We
Oh, we
do.
fear it.
Yeah, we like homeostasis, right? It's just
Look
it's
us throwing around 10-point words.
yeah.
You just flying right around.
Well, I just happen to be reading a book right now called "You Are the Mountain," I think is what it's called, and it's about overcoming your own uh, things that are holding you back, right? And one of the things that was said was like happiness is. I don't remember who said this. Somebody said this, like happiness is not necessarily, actually, I think it might be Eastern philosophy says happiness is not necessarily the goal. The goal is peace, right? So it's the calm water, right? But we like to be in, we like to, it's not necessarily that we want to be happy. It's like we want the comfort of knowing what is going to be. So structure does kind of help with that. But at the same time, does that beget complacency? So, we have to have the structure for some stability, but then we have to disrupt to innovate, if that makes sense.
It's the core of change management, right? We build our reputation on making the transitions through change as comfortable, predictable, controllable as possible, knowing full well that there will be discomfort there. And in corporate settings of business, those changes have to be reckoned with. They have to be managed and they have to be endured.
Sure.
Right. Whereas personally, we can eliminate all discomfort as we age. And that's how we end up, on the canoe, on the lake, at the top of your mountain alone. If we want to just, I'm thinking about that the mountain, you are your mountain. And I suppose in that context, Rich, it's you are your mountain to climb. And is the mountain also an obstacle? Your own worst obstacle too?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Get your mountain out of your own way.
Yep. Right. So we have structure, right? But then we have, change creates that discomfort, the urgency that Ben and we talked about this a few weeks ago, right? And I think there's where the iterative part of this comes in, because we see through structure, we do see opportunities for improvement. We see the where now we can find out where ambiguity exists, where uncertainty exists, right? And then we need to make changes and iterate on that, right? And we've all kind of experienced that in the arts for sure, right?
Sure. I'm experiencing it right now, actually. Do you see how dark the room has become?
It's because the sun's coming out behind you.
It's because my light bulbs thought that it was time to go off. This happened very gradually, right? So I have an opportunity to make a statement and fix the situation, which I'm going to do. Now it's going to seem like magic for those of you at home that don't have these light bulbs. It's still magical to me. Alexa, turn on the downstairs lights. Oh, my husband.
You're a wizard, Ari.
Who knew?
Wow, look at that. So
You can do magic.
So
love
back to what you were saying.
Yeah. So iterations, right? Changes that need to occur for us to have the continuous improvements to do. I mean, we don't want to have like endless tinkering, right? Like nonstop, or like it would be good to get back to that homeostasis that we love, but in the new, going from was it Bridges model, right? Going to from the ending to the new beginning, right? But we do have to have that that change process that happens.
Yeah. Part of my notes when I was researching SIP myself too was that too often we do confuse this endless tinkering and polishing with progress, and it can hold us back when it is not identified, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, for me, the iteration part of it is where you're actively enabling and encouraging that structured learning to happen.
Sure.
So you have that structure set up in that sort of first bit in the sequences or processes that we've talked about. And then in the iterations, you're saying, okay, well, we're also going to be at the same time making our core product or serving our core service. We're also going to be intentionally trying to drive some learning, and we're not just throwing anything at the wall and seeing what's sticking, but we're going to try to do some hypothesis driven learning, or we're going to try saying, okay, what are we sensing in the market? How can we start to meet that need? Or what are we seeing like the next version of our product? How do we start to validate that that's the right next version to go after? Maybe we run some kind of parallel trials or things like that. But it's not just a free for all. It's sort of
Right.
guided and structured in that sense. It's intentional, thoughtful learning within that scope.
Well, I love that you said that with being intentional and with purpose, because we've talked about that a few times through these 100 episodes, right? But
Mhm.
that's it. So it seems to me maybe this iterative stage of how we do things is where the meaning gets made. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think it's where it's starting to surface that. And then I'm kind of thinking out loud, but I'm wondering if it's a little bit also drawn out in the next phase, the sort of permutation phase.
Sure, that makes
I
sense.
don't know. You're the one that brought this to the table, so I'll turf it back to you and
Well,
say, what do you think?
how about you, Cheryl? What do you think?
Listening to the two of you, it is making me think about in that iteration. Sometimes you have to, two things. Ben, when you talk about parallel processing, the A/B testing structure, right? Happens in advertising,
Right.
in marketing,
Yeah.
all of this, which one gets a bigger response. That's one safe way to do it that is well known. It also, the process of iteration, the way I understand it with this framework, is that it may also require not starting from scratch, but this idea of losing a lot of what you've worked on and putting
Sure.
it aside and reshuffling the deck to add new things, and the accepting that this could happen and knowing that this could happen going into it is part of how this works.
Yeah. We've actually experienced a little of that with this guy, Hermie the HR Hermit Crab, a little bit, right? Where we've
Yeah.
had so it's, for those who don't know, right? Hermie the HR Hermit Crab is we've all written 2 books. The third one's on its way. We have some web comics that we've collaborated on, some videos out there, and during the process of putting almost any of these together, we have gone through certainly created sequences of the stories, and then made iterative changes. So we use a shared document, do iterative changes on those documents, and out of that we have had some permutations come out of some of those where we're like, okay, we're going to shelve this one for now, but we're going to move into some other thing. Yeah.
And what I love about working with the two of you in that exact process is that we as a company are walking the walk, right? I have no fears whatsoever of saying, and neither do the two of you, we might just be pressing too hard on this particular one. And if we agree that this can be shoved and put, none of us have to cling to something to the point of it becoming meaningless, in fact, right?
Yeah, sure.
So that's an important part of the creative process.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a certain degree of in my I can't help but to think back in my graduate program, during the capstone, the concept of self-efficacy, our self-confidence in being able to do the work that needs to be done. Of course that dovetails nicely into psychological safety, but if we can iterate and grow our self-efficacy through the learning, and be able to apply, some of that with some degree of autonomy, even in a regulated environment, right? It can go a long way to improving work.
Mhm. Yeah. And so then is the permutations part of it then where we start refining some of this stuff that we've iterated on?
Yeah, you know what, Ben? That's a
Is
great
that
question, and that is a good question for our next segment. We'll be right back.
In a world
where leadership needs clarity and action, and HR gets left out of the loop. One hermit crab steps in to save the day, only to be shut down by management. From the creators of Hermie the HR Hermit Crab and the Harmonious Workplaces podcast comes a new shell-shocking adventure, Out of the Loop Into the Fire, or HR Hung Out to Dry. This book blends workplace satire with evidence-based lessons, reminding leaders that culture, trust, and people strategy don't exist as extras. They form the foundation of lasting success. Whether you work as an HR professional, a leader, or just someone who has survived a few too many staff meetings, Hermie's stories will make you laugh, think, and maybe even change the way you see your workplace. Purchase Hermie the HR Hermit Crab, Out of the Loop, Into the Fire, or HR Hung Out to Dry, now available on Amazon and Ingram Spark. Shop now at harmoniousworkplaces.com/Hermie HR Crab. That's harmoniousworkplaces.com/Hermie HR Crab.
Huh, big change of Fred.
And we're back. All right, so we've been talking about bringing the arts into organizational change, organizational development. And so we've talked about this concept of SIP, sequences, iterations, permutations, right? And so the last segment really talked about the sequences, the structure, right? The iterations, the changes that occurred due to some degree of urgency that needs to happen. And then now talking about permutations, right? And so to set the stage for this, let me explain how this happened in the printmaking class. So before we created a print, right? We created a sequence. I think it was about 12 panels of concepts, right? Out of those 12 panels, we chose one of the panels to iterate on and make changes and, kind of sculpt it and change it, before we actually created the piece that we were going to manufacture, essentially, right? The permutation was the actual woodcut that we created out of this. So we took drawings, we took even some photographs and stuff like that we had done, right? And we turned this into a woodcut piece that we used chisels and a piece of wood and then put ink on that and then ran that through a press. So the permutation was basically taking one of the iterations that we did and then completely changed it into a different art form, into a different, something that was entirely unique and different and innovative. Does that make sense? So, from a business perspective, my pea brain was going, okay, I've done a lot of work with documenting as-is processes, structure, sequences, right? And then there's the to be, so through iteration, what is the to be state of things that we're going to be, and that to be through learning has created different types of outputs, that could occur. Does that make sense? Or am I talking gibberish? I could be talking gibberish.
No, I think it makes sense. And then, so can tie it then to the permutations part of it? You've got a drawing or a photograph that you've carved into a wood block and you're translating that into a print form.
Mm-hmm.
Tie that into then the business world where you've got some processes and you've got to change those processes for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm.
You've iterated through how do we want to change the processes. We've tried this, we've tried that, we've thought about it, we've workshopped it, and we're going to go with this process.
Right. But within that new process, right, we not only do we walk away with new standard operating procedures, but we also walk away with we can walk away with lessons learned that can be turned into knowledge transfer opportunities, where now we can create training and development, mentorship programs, those types of things that come out of this. So not even really like intended consequences. Like, we just wanted to get to the stage of continuous improvement, but now we actually have also, as a kind of a byproduct and a way to adapt to it. Now we have new structures that allow us to be able to adapt and uh, be more nimble and resilient for other changes that may come along the way. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And maybe as you've come up with these new processes, you've also been thinking about edge cases or, the what if scenarios.
Right.
What if this widget that always works or this machine always works goes offline for a day? What if it goes offline for 10 days or 100 days or, those kinds of real, like, never happen events? How do we deal with that?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, Ben. I mean, even when you think about manufacturing processes that have tight tolerances, right? Where, like machining, or I'm not sure about the pharmaceutical industry, but I could tell you machining, like, uh, through prototyping and getting to a point where where we're iterating, right? We can now create something that is more standard, more that produces something of that quality. We're getting to that Six Sigma level of you know fewer defects, by virtue of being able to essentially practice what we've learned and what we have refined through iteration to get to something that allows us to maintain quality.
In pharma, it's critical, right? You can't have defects in pharma.
That's right.
But
There's
you're
that
making,
infamous was it Tylenol?
Tylenol.
It was Tylenol. Yeah.
and look at the permutations of all of these, injections for diabetes and weight loss, and now there's microdoses, but that's been pulled out already anyway. Can't even keep up. You are making me think of the word transformation, though, right? Is permutation a parallel word in the corporate setting to transformation when these processes are successful and you have a transformational leader, right? At the opposite end of that, laissez-faire leader or transactional leader. Is the goal of a transformative style leadership to successfully undergo, execute, and finish and evolve with permutation?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the transformation, and we hear a lot of that, right? We actually hear a lot of that in RFPs for consulting. We hear, leaders in transformation being out there in the job market, and tech transformation is very commonly used, right? But transformation, yes, you need that leadership to bring everybody into that change, but that transformation at some point needs to be enculturated and needs to then become where we're going back to the sequence of structure. Right. Does that make sense?
My way or the highway is not well received, right? So if you're going to create change that is transformative, it has to be enculturated, right? You have to maybe go through the steps of sequencing and iteration to bring everyone with you.
Sure. Ben, you've been quiet. What do you got?
Well, I was just thinking about this idea of a transformative leader, and someone who is an ideal leader would also be asking the questions of not just how do we explore a new way of doing things and then refine that, but then how do we also see what else is out there that we don't really know, or how do we even test that our assumptions are the right assumptions to start testing? And those kinds of leaders are the ones that are going to be taking their company into really fertile territory or new territory, or going to get closer to their customers or get closer to what's an ideal widget to produce for their desired clientele.
Great.
Sure.
I've
Sure.
seen leaders who choose that path be accused of analysis paralysis too, right? There's like a balance in there too. Well, how much research are we going to do before we make a decision? Well, just enough.
Yeah.
You know, what?
Right.
Sure.
Just enough to
But
keep
it's
us out of trouble,
yeah,
just
and
enough to keep us competitive, you know?
and it comes back to some of the whole idea of SIP in a business sense is that you're not just taking all your sketches and all your photographs and saying all of this we're going to test.
Right.
Like in your printmaking class, you picked one and you started exploring that,
Sure.
and then you sort of said, okay, this is the one I'm gonna make into a woodblock, and you know that's essentially putting all your chips in that one woodblock basket. And you've done that after doing some homework and after doing some sort of quote unquote rigorous testing of that hypothesis, but then you're woodblocking and then you're using that woodblock to say, okay, this is where we're going to start. Then saying everything that we're going to be is based on what we've decided from this woodblock. And hopefully you've vetted that out in whatever way you need to, that gives you some of that knowledge. And to Cheryl's point, you don't have 17 hours to decide that. You're in this printmaking workshop. You've got maybe a couple of hours to figure that out.
Sure.
And then you got to go. And so
Sure.
that's the dynamic of that market pressure. So you have to figure this out at some point. You don't have the luxury of spinning forever.
Right. Now, one of the ways that organizations can help to, I don't want to say necessarily speed up or condense the process, but be more efficient about it, is sometimes bringing in a third party, a consultant to help, especially with the analysis part of the sequencing part. And then being part of that iterative process is being somebody who can facilitate the conversation, right? I think that's something that I know I've personally been part of, as a consultant. I think we've all had, whether we're an external consultant or even an internal one within the organization, we having somebody who's who was it that said you can't
Dan
read
Pinkham.
the label? You can't, Dan Pinkham, right? You can't read the label from inside the jar. Right. Which, look, people do know what's going on inside the company to some extent, but sometimes it is helpful to have a third party come out. And to that effect, one of the things that I think is that we can learn from the arts that ties into our feedback episode is the idea of critique, and to have other people looking at things from different angles, right? And because we can become myopic in our own view of what especially things that we've created, right? If that makes sense.
Rich, are you saying that all external consultants should adopt the role of Shakespeare's fool characters? They're sort of the only ones that have permission to criticize the king.
Criticize the king. I love it. Yes, that's
They
right.
tend,
That's
they
awesome.
tend to have wisdom no one else has.
Right.
Yeah.
And they get away with all the good bawdy jokes and things like that.
Yes. All right.
Until they're no longer silent.
Yeah. Until the king decides to cut their head off. Right.
Is the fool in Shakespeare? I mean, I know there's Midsummer Night's Dream. There was Puck, but did the fool break the fourth wall frequently, or
Totally depends on. I mean, the character sure could, and it just depends on how the director wants to play
how
it.
the director plays it? Okay, I was just curious. So, well, folks, we are just about at time here. I think we could talk art and business and do lots more talking about this, and we will at the ACMP conference in Chicago, Midwest, in April. But Any last words for our audience, folks?
I have been thinking about something that I've been wanting to ask you, Rach. Where is your wood block right now?
Oh, that's a good question. I left it there.
Interesting.
However, I will say, because my child goes to SAIC, the School of the Arts Institute of Chicago, he was able to keep the wood block, and there is a print on Instagram. So I'll have to see if I can find it.
Huh.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if it had become, let's say, if it had been permutated into a paperweight, or just something that's collecting dust somewhere, or what will you ever do with it again? I was wondering if that was part of the permutation process, but we're learning. I'm not sure if that's pertinent.
I should say, you know what, Cheryl, the wood block is left at SAIC for whatever, but whatever that's worth. But the print is somewhere in the house here.
So you were not attached.
And it's collecting dust because that was.
So you were not attached. You abandoned the wood block. You were not.
I abandoned. Yes, yeah. Which happens too, right? I mean, we do have things that we can leave behind.
It's out there having agency.
I'm picturing Hermie with a room full of wood blocks and other artistic stuff that he's tried to get his company to try different things, and everything just gets chucked in a closet and gathers dust.
There you go. Right on. Although, he's had to, book one, gag one, he is iterating his shell constantly, right? So, yep, lots of that.
Kept them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious what would be if we were to suggest one thing for someone out in the business world to try or to explore with SIP, what would that be?
Just one thing. It's a 3-step thing.
You got to start somewhere.
And the S, the I, the P, I think everyone gets a coffee mug and they start with that.
Coffee mugs and t-shirts and call it a day.
That's right.
Everybody take a sip. Now, buckle in, because I'm going to tell you something new.
Right on. No, I think, well, here, I'm going to be trite for a second. Steal like an artist, right? Take some of the concepts that are here, right? And if they're appropriate for your organization, there's a lot of things that you can try and start small, right? I mean, we books start with one sentence. A Hermie cartoon starts with a sketch in a sketchbook, right? A theatrical production may start with some improvisation and just talking things out. And the writing room has all kinds of things that can be thrown out there. So I think start small and try things and grow from there.
That's great advice, Rich. Start small. Creep it in.
Good night. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for our 100th podcast. And Cheryl, as our returning co-host, can you please take us out today?
If you've learned nothing else, listeners, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find all episodes, resources, and ways to connect with us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love your feedback. Please rate, review, share, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And don't forget to add Harmonious Workplaces to your favorites so you're notified when new episodes are released. Again, visit us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.